I never thought a breakdown in my marriage would lead me to such a complicated moment, one that still plays over in my mind like a scene I wish I could pause and rewind. That evening started like any other. The house was quiet, the weight of another argument with my husband still hanging heavy in the air. I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands trembling, tears slipping down my cheeks, wondering how something once so full of love could now feel so empty. That's when the knock on the door came, a soft, almost hesitant. It was Ryan, my best friend's husband. I hadn't expected anyone. I hadn't even looked decent. My face was puffy, hair tied up in a messy knot, wearing the same hoodie I'd cried into the night before. Ryan had come by to drop off something for my husband, but one look at me and his expression changed. I could see the concern in his eyes, the kind that feels oddly comforting when you've been invisible for too long. He stepped inside, not pushing, not asking questions right away. Just present. We weren't close, not like that. Ryan was always the polite, quiet one in the group. He wasn't loud or overly friendly, just kind in a way that didn't demand attention. But in that moment, with me breaking down in front of him, he didn't say much. He didn't need to. His calm presence made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in months. I told him bits and pieces. How my marriage had become more about surviving than loving. How the distance between my husband and me had grown so wide I didn't even know how to reach across anymore. Ryan listened. Really listened. And then, without warning, something changed in the air. Not in a dramatic way, nothing loud or sudden. It was just a quiet shift. He sat next to me and gently put his hand on mine. At first, I froze. It was a simple touch. Not invasive. Not demanding. Just gentle. But in that moment, when I was feeling so raw and broken, it felt like someone had opened a window and let air into a room I thought had been sealed shut. I didn't know how to react. I didn't pull away, but I didn't lean in either. I was caught between guilt, confusion, and something even harder to admit, relief. Because for the first time in a long time, I felt comfort. But this wasn't just anyone. This was my friend's husband. A man who had his own marriage. His own promises. And yet, there we were, sitting far too close for comfort, in a house that no longer felt like home. I don't know if it was weakness, loneliness, or something deeper I hadn't faced, but what happened next blurred every line I thought I'd never cross. Ryan didn't say anything right away. He just stayed there beside me, his hand still lightly resting on mine like he was waiting for me to pull away, to stop him, to remind us both of who we were. But I didn't. I couldn't. It felt like the silence between us spoke louder than any words could. And maybe that was part of the problem, there had been too much silence in my life lately. At home, my husband barely looked at me, barely acknowledged my pain, like I had become just another piece of furniture in the house. It hadn't always been that way. There was a time when we were happy. Married young, full of dreams, sharing everything. But somewhere along the way, we lost each other. My husband got busier, more distant, more impatient. The arguments started small, about groceries, the dishes, the thermostat. But over time, they grew colder, heavier. It wasn't about the little things anymore. It was about how invisible I felt. How unwanted. I confided in my best friend a few times, Ryan's wife. She told me to hang in there, that marriages go through rough patches. And I believed her. I wanted to believe her. But lately, it felt like the rough patch was never ending. And worse, she had no idea her husband and I had started exchanging small texts here and there. Harmless things at first. A check-in. A funny meme. But they became longer. More personal. He noticed the sadness in my tone before anyone else did. He remembered things my own husband didn't. Still, I didn't see it coming. I didn't plan for this moment. I didn't ask for it. As we sat there, the room suddenly felt too quiet. I could hear my own breathing. I looked at Ryan, and he looked at me like he was searching for something, permission, maybe. Or maybe he was just as lost as I was. My heart was racing. Not out of excitement, but confusion. Guilt started to crawl up my spine, yet I couldn't bring myself to pull away. I didn't know what was worse, what might happen next or the way I already felt about it. Because deep down, I knew something had changed between us. And there was no pretending anymore. But just as I opened my mouth to say something, to stop whatever was happening or maybe to confess something I hadn't fully understood myself, we heard the front door open. We froze. The sound of the front door clicking open was like a jolt back into reality. My breath caught in my throat, and Ryan's hand immediately pulled back. For a second, neither of us moved. It was like time stood still. The hallway creaked, followed by the sound of footsteps, slow, unsure. My heart pounded so hard I was sure it could be heard across the house. It was my husband. He'd come home early. That alone was strange. He usually stayed late at work, finding reasons not to come back until dinner was cold and I was already in bed. I quickly wiped my face with my sleeve, trying to pull myself together, trying to act like nothing unusual had just happened. Ryan stood up, his body stiff, eyes darting toward the hallway. "What's going on?" my husband asked as he stepped into the room, his eyes scanning between us. His voice wasn't angry, just tired, curious. Like he already sensed something was off but didn't want to admit it to himself. "Ryan was just dropping something off," I said, quickly, too quickly. My voice cracked a little, but I forced a small smile. Ryan nodded, playing along, though he looked just as uncomfortable as I felt. "Yeah, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt anything. I was just about to leave." My husband gave a small shrug and walked into the kitchen without another word. Ryan turned to me, his face tight, almost apologetic. "Take care," he said softly, then left. The door closed behind him, but the tension didn't leave with him. If anything, it settled heavier in the room. My husband didn't ask any more questions. He never did. That was his way, ignore the cracks and pretend everything was still whole. But I felt it, that shift again. Like something had broken open inside me and couldn't be put back. Later that night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while he snored beside me. I kept thinking about Ryan. About what almost happened. About how I'd felt something real, for the first time in months. But it wasn't just about Ryan. It was about me. About how lost I'd become in a life that no longer felt like mine. What scared me most wasn't what Ryan did, or even what might have happened. What scared me was how badly I wanted to feel seen again, even if it came from the wrong person. The days that followed were quiet, but not in the peaceful kind of way. More like walking through fog, everything blurred, heavy, and uncertain. I couldn't stop thinking about that moment with Ryan. It was like it had planted something inside me I couldn't ignore anymore. Every time I looked at my husband, I felt the distance even more. We barely spoke unless it was necessary. He didn't ask what was wrong, and I didn't bother pretending I was okay. I saw Ryan again 3 days later. It was at a small gathering my best friend had arranged, a casual dinner with a few couples, nothing out of the ordinary. But when I walked into their house and saw him across the room, I felt my stomach flip. His eyes met mine for a brief second, and we both quickly looked away, like we'd rehearsed that move 100 times. The whole evening felt like a performance. I laughed when I was supposed to, nodded through conversations, and smiled at people who had no idea how fast my heart was racing. My best friend chatted beside me, completely unaware of the storm quietly building between the two people closest to her. It was a cruel kind of irony. I felt awful. But also, trapped. Ryan stayed on the other side of the room most of the night, but I could feel him watching me. Not constantly, just in quick, stolen glances. And when I caught those glances, something inside me tightened. I wanted to escape. I wanted to talk to him. I wanted to do anything but sit there pretending everything was fine. Later that night, after most of the guests had left, I stepped outside for air. The backyard was quiet, dark except for the string lights glowing softly overhead. I didn't expect Ryan to follow. But he did. He stood next to me in silence for a moment, then said, "We need to talk." His voice was low, tense. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. "I know," I whispered, not looking at him. He stepped a little closer. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. About you." I turned to face him, and for a second, we were just two people on the edge of a line we couldn't uncross. And just as the words began to leave my mouth, words that could change everything, we heard the back door open behind us. The sound of the back door creaking open cut through the night like a warning. I turned sharply, my heart leaping into my throat. Ryan immediately stepped back, creating space between us, his hands now shoved deep into his pockets like that could erase what had just passed between us. My best friend stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the warm kitchen light. She looked confused, but not angry, at least not yet. "Hey, you two okay out here?" she asked, stepping outside, barefoot on the patio. "Everyone's gone. I was looking for you." I forced a smile, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, just needed some air." She looked between us, her eyes lingering a little too long. I couldn't tell if she noticed something or if my guilt was just playing tricks on me. "Okay," she said slowly, then turned back inside. "Come in soon, it's getting chilly." The second she disappeared, I turned to Ryan, my voice barely above a whisper. "We can't keep doing this. It's not fair, to her, to anyone." He nodded, but his eyes didn't match his words. "I know. I don't know how to stop." Neither did I. That night, when I got home, I couldn't sleep. The walls felt tighter, the silence louder. My husband was already in bed, phone in hand, scrolling like he always did, barely noticing me. I stared at the ceiling, the image of Ryan and my best friend in the same room burning in my head. I had never been the kind of person to cross lines, to betray trust. But here I was, standing in the middle of something I couldn't define, with emotions I couldn't control. The next morning, everything exploded. It started with a text. My best friend's name popped up on my screen, early, too early. Just a simple message. "We need to talk. Alone." My stomach dropped. Something in those 4 words felt different. Urgent. Heavy. I met her later that afternoon at a quiet cafe, barely able to sit still as she stirred her coffee without taking a sip. She didn't even look at me when she spoke. "I think Ryan's been distant lately. I don't know if it's work or something else, but," she paused, eyes finally meeting mine, "have you noticed anything strange about him?" I stared at her, trying to keep my face calm. "No, not really." She nodded, but she didn't look convinced. And then came the words I wasn't prepared for. "I saw the way he looked at you last night." Everything inside me froze. I felt exposed, cornered, like someone had just ripped the air out of the room. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. She leaned in a little closer. "If there's something going on, I deserve to know. I'm not stupid." I could hear my own heartbeat. Fast. Loud. And just when I thought things couldn't get worse, her voice dropped even lower. "Because you're not the only one acting different. Your husband, he's been texting someone too." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. My mind raced, trying to process what she had just said. My husband, texting someone else? It was like a punch to the gut. I had been so focused on Ryan, on what was happening between us, that I hadn't even stopped to think about what my own marriage might really look like beneath the surface. "Who?" I finally asked, my voice trembling. She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "I found this on his screen earlier today. It's a number I didn't recognize." The messages were flirty. My heart sank as I looked at the screen. There were texts filled with little emojis, questions about meeting up, words that felt like betrayal. My husband wasn't the man I thought he was either. For the first time, I saw the full picture. Both of them, the two men closest to me, were keeping secrets. Both of them were crossing lines I thought untouchable. And in the middle of it all, I was the one being torn apart. That night, I confronted my husband. The conversation was raw, painful, and full of the honesty we had both avoided for so long. He admitted to feeling disconnected from me, lonely in our marriage. He never expected me to feel the same way or to be so close to someone else. It hurt every word, but it also brought a strange kind of relief. The silence between us had been broken. Then, I called Ryan. I told him everything, about my husband, about my best friend, about how lost I felt. Ryan listened, silent at first, then he admitted he felt trapped too. He hadn't wanted to cause any pain, only to find someone who understood. The next few days were filled with difficult conversations between all of us. My best friend confronted Ryan, my husband, and I talked about what went wrong, and I tried to figure out where I stood. The tangled web of feelings, lies, and hurt wasn't easy to unravel, but slowly, the truth started to clear the fog. But just when I thought the worst was behind me, the final twist came crashing in. One evening, I found a letter slipped under my door. No name, no signature, just a folded piece of paper. My hands shook as I opened it. "I know everything," it said simply. "And you're not the only one being watched." The words sent a chill through me. Someone had been paying attention to all of this, my pain, my secrets, the hidden moments. And now, I wasn't just caught between betrayals. I was caught in something bigger, something I never saw coming. The story wasn't over. Not yet. The anonymous letter shook me more than anything else had in this whole tangled mess. I spent the next few days trying to figure out who could have sent it. Was it someone close, someone who knew everything but chose to stay silent until now? Or was it a stranger who had been watching us all from the shadows? The uncertainty was almost as painful as the betrayals themselves. But slowly, I realized the letter was less about who sent it and more about what it meant. It was a warning, yes, but also a wake-up call. I couldn't keep pretending that everything would just fix itself or that hiding the truth would make the pain go away. I had to face what was really going on, not just with Ryan, my husband, or my best friend, but within myself. In the weeks that followed, I made some hard decisions. I stepped back from all of them for a while, Ryan, my husband, even my best friend. I needed space to heal, to understand what I truly wanted and deserved. I started seeing a counselor, someone who could help me sort through the guilt, confusion, and heartbreak. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Through those sessions, I learned a lot about love, trust, and forgiveness, not just toward others, but toward myself. I realized that sometimes people make mistakes not because they don't care, but because they're scared or lonely. That didn't excuse the hurt, but it helped me find some compassion in the chaos. My husband and I eventually decided to separate, not out of anger, but out of a mutual recognition that we had grown apart too much. Ryan and I agreed to keep distance, to respect the boundaries that had been crossed. My best friend and I had difficult talks, and while our friendship would never be the same, we found a way to move forward honestly. Looking back, this whole experience taught me how fragile relationships can be when communication breaks down. It showed me how important it is to listen, not just to others, but to your own heart. And most of all, it reminded me that no matter how painful the truth can be, facing it is the only way to find peace. So if there's one thing I want anyone watching this story to take away, it's this: don't ignore the cracks in your life, no matter how small they seem. Sometimes those cracks are the first sign that something needs to change, and only by facing them can you truly begin to heal. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever faced something similar, or if this resonates with you, please share your thoughts below. Remember, you're never alone in this. 10.